There's over 500,000 books being published a year now, 500,000. A good portion of those are being self-published. Of the books being self-published, there's only a fraction of a percent that are actually taking the steps to ensure that they're putting out a quality product. I see so many self-published works that are full of errors, like typos and grammatical errors, like from page 1. And you just think like, dude, if you're going to the trouble of writing this, at least value your work enough that you would consider investing in an editor. It doesn't have to be a costly endeavor, but it makes a world of difference in what you're putting out to the world.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start A Joyful Rebellion. If you've been to this show a few times, you've heard me say in the intro that I want you to be the author of your own story. And that statement has a double meaning. First, I like to think about our lives as a movie where we can choose to be in charge of writing a large part of the script instead of allowing others to do it for us. And the second meaning is more literal. Sharing the experience and wisdom you've accumulated over the years could be just the inspiration someone needs to go out and do great things in the world. And in my conversation with Dianne Pearce and David Yurkovich, we talk about how someone who has a story inside them can begin thinking about getting that story into a form that can benefit others. Dianne and David have developed an understanding of what it takes to be a published author through their experiences with their own books and running their publishing company, Current Words. We demystify the publishing process and talk about actionable things you can do to begin your author journey if that's something you're interested in. This is one of our longer episodes, so refresh your drink and enjoy this conversation. Dianne and David, thank you so much for being a part of our Joyful Rebellion today.
Thank you for having us. I love your logo.
Oh, thank you. It was fun to design that. I don't usually work with a lot of graphics and things of that sort, but it was kind of fun to dip my toe into that world for a minute.
It looks like Art Crumb and Charles Burns collided. It's really pretty cool.
Oh, I wanted sort of that rebellious vibe to it, but also something a little more maybe Renaissance feel. I'm excited to talk today about what you guys do because you have teamed up, and I want to find out what the progression to this was, but you guys have a publishing business, and it's called Current Words Publishing. David, I know you've written several books. I read your bio, and Dianne, you have also done a lot of writing, but created several different publishing companies or presses. And I want to find out like what that means, because I know a lot of times we hear that out in the world and it's like, okay, why is there a different press under all of these different publishers?
Yeah.
So I've got that question, but we'll come around to that in a little while. But I would imagine that, David, when you were going through writing your book, Dianne, the same way, you ran into some experiences that sort of informed the need for you guys to collaborate and start your publishing company. Can you tell us a little bit about what led up to it?
Sure. The publishing company was an outgrowth of a writing workshop that Dianne formed in Delaware. I want to say in 2000. When did you form that? In 2013, 15. We were living in Southern Delaware at the time and looking for a way to like kind of get us to be more creative and disciplined about writing. And Dianne, who had been in workshops before, suggested let's form a workshop. We put out flyers at local Starbucks, and I think probably on social media. I had to like a handful of people showed up, maybe 8 or 10 people the first day that we kicked it off. And everyone really clicked really well. And it became a week. What was it, a bi-weekly thing?
Bi-weekly,
every 2 weeks we met, usually at our place. We had a really big farmhouse kitchen at the time with this massive table. So we'd all gather around it, and for 4 hours or so, we would all participate in the workshop. After a few years, I think it started because we decided to do a theme, and we all had a theme of doing a short horror story. And we all thought all the horror stories were really well done. And at that point, forged the idea of like, wow, we should put these together into a book, but we need a publishing company to do that. So we being Dianne and I, and we launched a publishing company. I had experience with publishing before, so I knew some of the basics about it and worked in publishing. So we followed the path to getting our business off the ground and published this book. And for the first couple collections we did, we kept it limited to people in the workshop, but then realized that was going to be really limiting and seemed a little bit vain. So we decided let's open it up to the world and start accepting submissions for collections and looking for full-length novels. And it just kind of became an outgrowth of that. So the publishing business itself, though it started out more as a mechanism for the writing group to kind of spur them on, it became its own business of its own. And we started getting manuscript queries from people all across the country, really all across the globe. So that's kind of where it had its origin.
Okay. Yeah. And Dianne, do you have anything to add to that in terms of the progression, where things started, where things are right now, get us caught up? Because one thing I'm wondering as I hear David talking about that is it sounds like you guys had already some knowledge and you were surrounded by a lot of talent with your workshop.
Yeah, we really lucked out. First of all, everybody who came really surprised us because it's a kind of a rural area and we didn't expect that we were going to find a lot of people there, rudely, right? Because we thought, well, maybe they haven't had a lot of writing education or something. But everybody that came, really changed our opinion completely. And there's a really thriving writing community there. And they were really good and we were really stunned. And, we ended up some of our best friends. We met that way. I guess the thing about me is Dave had previously on his own written and drawn and published graphic novels. So I knew he knew how to do it, how to make a book. Dave is extremely good at figuring all that stuff out. I think that the disconnect that we had that we're just, we're still working on, really, I mean, we're still growing, is that the publishing landscape is so different than it used to be, or I don't even know if it ever was. I was saying to our poetry group yesterday when I was talking to them that there's I don't know if you've seen Loudermilk, but there's an episode in Loudermilk where he picks up the phone and he's like, they want to buy my book. And Dave and I just laughed because we were like, never happens.
Who's they? Yeah. Who's
that
they?
never happens. And
right.
That's what everybody thinks, So we basically started doing it because we were like, well, we can do it and nobody can stop you from doing it. And Amazon has facilitated everybody doing it, right? So you could wake up tomorrow and publish your own book if you wanted to. I mean, it's pretty idiot-proof the way Amazon has set it up. But that doesn't mean that you're going to get out there, that you're going to get noticed, that your book is going to get noticed. And it really is something that we have learned, right, through experience. And we had many imprints. We still have them. But because we thought at one point in our evolution, well, maybe if we do the horror books under a horror imprint, so people know that if they go to that publishing company, they're only going to find horror, maybe that will help. But that's not really a thing. And kind of the piece that we didn't have, that we missed, that we now have, is that just like with a record, right? You don't buy Capitol Records' next record because you bought their Miles Davis record and now they're putting out an Adele record and you're just going to buy it. If that's not your thing, you're not going to buy it. Doesn't matter what company put it out.
That's right.
And so we did not realize at the time that books sell today 100% because of the author, because the author is somebody that people are interested in, that they've read something else by the author, that they want to read a second thing or a third thing by the author. It has nothing to do with the company. So that's the important piece, and we make beautiful books. And like I said, Amazon has made it very easy that you could probably go on tomorrow and publish a book if you wanted to. But Dave and I know how to do it well because we've worked on it for so long. But we also know that other piece. And that's the tough nut to crack, is helping the author to really realize that they have to be the product and not their publishing company. It's them, the human, that sells the book.
Correct me if I'm off course here, but it seems like the old model was a literary agent. They would sell your idea or pitch your idea to a publisher. The publisher would either give you a thumbs up or down. And then once they gave you the thumbs up, if they did, then it was time to start getting the book completed, they would find the audience or advertise it or however. And seems like it's completely not that way at all anymore.
Yeah, so you
what
can
you
still
described.
find an agent if you wanted to try. Dave had one once for one of his books, and she spent a good long time shopping his book around, but nobody really picked it up. And then let's say that an agent does shop you to a big publisher, and a big publisher does pick you up, and a big publisher gives you a $10,000 advance, right? In the publisher's mind, they're giving you that money so that you can quit your job and write your next book. But they're not giving you enough to quit your job and write. I mean, not even in a rural area where like we used to live. It's not enough money. But the other thing is they're not marketing you. And maybe they have a hookup where some bookstores automatically take their books, but they take them on consignment. And if they don't sell in a year, they send them back to the publisher and the publisher remainders them. So the thing that authors don't realize is if they get picked up by a big publishing company and they get that advance, they have to sell enough books to earn the advance. So if they get a $5,000 advance and they only sell $300 worth of books, which is completely normal to do that, they're not going to get picked up again. They're not going to have to give back the money. Those big publishing companies make enough money from like Stephen King and stuff that they can bet on you. They're betting on you. They're not betting on your story. They're not trying to sell your story. They're giving you an opportunity and you have to sell it. And if you don't sell it, then they're not going to publish you again. And then you take yourself out to another publisher and you say, I'd like to publish my second book. And I've done it myself when people have come to me. I've looked up their first book and said, well, how come they're not picking you up again?
Yeah.
And the answer is my books didn't sell.
Okay.
So it's sort of like everybody wants that, right? They want that phone call. They want that advance.
Right.
It can really tank their career and they don't even really think about it, And so we're working on a different model now. We started off, everybody who came to our writing group, it just so happened was over the age of 40. So we started off focusing on writers over the age of 40, because a lot of times those traditional publishers, they want the young folks too. They want people who are just starting out.
Yeah, they want to get a couple of decades out of them.
Right. But what we're realizing now is that getting to the point where you make money off of your books is a slow burn. It doesn't happen the first book. This doesn't necessarily happen the second book. And what you have to do is you have to invest in yourself as a writer. You have to invest in your book, being a good-looking book. You have to invest time in selling the book at the same time that you're writing the next book, And if you think about an entrepreneur in general, and writers are entrepreneurs, and you start your own business, you usually keep your main job and you use all your extra hours to get your business going, right?
Right.
Writers have to do that too. And a lot of times I think the thought is that they just hand it over to the publisher and then everything falls in.
Make it all better. Yeah.
It's not like that. Their book is them and their business, and they have to make it as beautiful as they can make it, and then they have to sell it. And they don't sell it by saying, I've got this book. They sell it by getting people interested in them, And as we've worked with writers over the years, some are better at that than others. Maybe a lot of writers you think of as introverts too. So it doesn't feel so natural to them maybe to do that, but it's really what they have to do if they want to be successful. So Dave and I, we love writers. We love reading their writing and we love helping them. So we're really trying to throw out all of that mythology and tell them, no, this is what this is what you need to do. And
that's what I really wanted to dispel is that mythology here, because the person I'm thinking about is not necessarily trying to make a career of their writing. They're a person who has a story. And as we know, a book is a vehicle for a story. And now books come in so many forms, audiobooks and Kindle versions. And then, of course, the traditionally published, which I like to hold a book in my hand still. It gives you a reason for just hanging out in public spaces and people ignoring you because you've got the book in
your book. That's right. It's your safety net.
Yes. As an introvert, I appreciate it. So it's really cool to be able to get your story out there. And there's so many ways, like you said, you guys are helping people do that without having to go through, okay, let's build an audience for your book. You you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You could work with someone like you guys and you can help them do it correctly, do it well. So that story that they have within them is going to be well presented, and you could get it out to just your family if you wanted to. But
Absolutely.
your family might read it and say, oh, this is really good. I should send this to someone else. And then it snowballs from there. I'm sure you've seen it happen. But I want to just demystify the fact that once you get that first book done, then you have to start thinking about the next one. Some people only have one story. And
Right. I mean, what's it, To Kill a Mockingbird, right? She really only had one story. I mean, there was a second one that came out at the end of her life there, but the one that she had was damn good, So that's the thing, right? Yeah, Dave and I used to give a talk at writing conferences called Don't Die with Your Story, because, yeah, your story is important and it's going to mean a lot to somebody, and why not get it in a form where you can share it? So that's important too. The other thing I think too is if it's a personal story, something that's happened to you in your life, that's a beautiful thing. It's also a tricky thing because somebody out there has had a similar experience. So I don't know, let's say, you had a horrible accident doing some sort of sport and got all banged up. Somebody else out there also had one and got all banged up, right? So you have to think about, you want to tell your story, but you have to learn how to tell it, even though it's nonfiction, as if it was fiction. You have to add those elements in that make it, because I always used to tell my students when I was teaching writing about a car accident I had. I had a car accident in Philadelphia, and my car hit a trolley track on a cobblestone street in the rain and just started to spin down a hill. And luckily, the street was empty, so nobody was there. Then the car smashed into a phone booth in front of a diner on a Sunday morning that was full of people from church. So all of these people were looking out the window at me. I can tell you that story like that, but I cannot tell it in a way that makes you feel how I felt going down that hill and spinning. Lots of other people have had stories where they've had car accidents where the car has done donuts, right? What makes it valuable is to be able to augment it with those techniques of fiction, which is not lying. It's metaphor, simile, right? Some people will throw every noun, they'll throw 3 descriptive words at it, and you don't always need them. And, so it's like that pick and choose that sort of just like a good cook, right? It's not false, but it makes the person experience it as close as they can to the way that you've experienced it. And that's something that I think that Dave and I are really good at helping writers with, because we've both done so much editing in our lives. And I've been teaching students since the 90s, and Dave's been an editor almost his entire life. So that's another thing that a lot of times you don't get with a publisher, right? You get somebody who's maybe just graduated from college, or somebody who knows how to make a book, but they don't know how to make it very tasty and readable. I really pride myself on not changing the writer's voice and not turning their story into my story. I try to mimic them and get in there and just sort of lift it in places where it needs to be lifted, and a lot of times with a traditional publisher, you don't get that opportunity. They just take your book, they edit it, they make the cover for it, they decide what it's going to look like, they decide what the blurb is going to say. And Dave and I have a lot of really good advice about that, but we don't take it over.
They might even retitle your book. They don't like the title of it. We see that
Oh, yeah.
a lot in short stories. Short stories get retitled all the time because authors can be terrific authors, but awful at naming their stories. So I think to kind of echo what Dianne was saying. So I think you got to think about it this way too. Like, I think I read this week that there's something over 500,000 books being published a year now. 500,000. A good portion of those are being self-published. So in other words, like, self-publishing has kind of hit the market pretty heavily.
Oh, yeah.
Of the books being self-published, there's only a fraction of a percent that are actually taking the steps to kind of like ensure that they're putting out a quality product, by which I mean they are actually having it proofread and edited. I see so many self-published works that are just so full of errors, like typos and grammatical errors, like from page 1. And you just think like, dude, if you're going to the trouble of writing this, at least value your work enough that you would consider investing in an editor. It doesn't have to be a costly endeavor, but it makes a world of difference in what you're putting out to the world, or, if it's just for your family, what you're sharing with your family.
I think you have to be careful with that too, though, because you don't want to get somebody who's going to change it, right? It has to be
Right.
somebody who's got the same goal for the book that you have for the book.
Yeah, you want a good partnership, but I gotta say, I've been in the middle of reading a book that I remember thinking to myself, gosh, wasn't this a bestseller? And by the third error, it's easy for Word to not catch the three versions of the word there. And that's cool. But if somebody didn't get that, sometimes I've just put a book down and never gone back because I thought, you know what? I just don't know. I know it's just one stupid word they keep misspelling, but I'm out.
It pulls you out of the work, and it's your time. And your time is the most valuable thing you have. We don't always realize that, especially when we work 9 to 5s and stuff like that, right? We kind of lose the value of our time, but your time is limited on Earth and you only have so much. So, on the one hand, if you're a writer, you don't want to die with your story. On the other hand, if you're a reader, you don't want to read boring stuff or badly proofed stuff, right? You want to give your time to valuable things.
I hate to admit that I've been a snob like that, but yeah, there have been a few books I've just put down because I thought, well, okay, if they can't spell this one word or put this sentence together correctly, I don't know if I can listen to anything else that's going on here. But I will say I had the experience back in 2012 of self-publishing, and Amazon had this, it was called Create Space at the time. It was pretty cool. You could do a one-stop shop. They don't have it anymore. And they'll do the publishing, but they won't, to my knowledge, connect you with a proofreader or an ed or any of that, which is where you guys come in. I was really fascinated because I don't know if that wasn't successful for them on the scale they're trying to do things, but they're really good at, once you've got that beautiful manuscript and the cover and everything else, Amazon's really good at putting that ink on the paper and shipping it to someone. That's not really the part that anyone needs to be good at who's writing a book. They need to be good at everything that's in the book, the content, which is where you guys come in and help them make it beautiful. But if you don't know where to go to get that, it's a problem, because then you feel like you're on your own. And that's the biggest reason I want to have this conversation, is people who think, oh my gosh, this seems like a huge endeavor. Well, just know it is. And just getting words on paper out of your soul or out of your head or out of wherever those words are coming, it starts to hurt after a little while if you're not used to doing it all the time. I had that experience. I have that experience every time I try to write something that is more than just a blog post that tells what happened. As like you said, Dianne, trying to describe the feelings of what happened, trying to get that connection from one person to another through a story is far more than just words. I've read books that tell what happened, and those are really bland books, because I was like, okay, I've seen that happen. I can imagine how that would happen, but draw me in, pull me in. Like David, you said, you want to be into the work, not just filtering the words through your heads. And that's where you guys come in, because you can look at someone's manuscript and say, okay, this was great. This little scene that you have describing what you went through is powerful, but let's peel it back and talk about how it made you feel. What were some of the things from the five senses that were happening? Let's put that in there so you can really draw someone into the work. What does it look like when you first get a client and it's really good? The story's there. You can see the bones, and then you realize you need to put some muscle on it, put some meat here, maybe add some details, or strip away some details to leave a little more to the reader's imagination. But what are some of those conversations like when you get a writer who's never written anything before and you coach them through to really polish up their manuscript?
Well, we've even worked with folks who have published, and at some point they've come to us for a later book in their series. And one of the things that you don't realize about yourself as a writer is that you have the things that you repeat, just like you have certain meals that are like your go-to meals or something, or whatever it is, you have certain things that you repeat. So there was one gentleman that we worked with, and I was editing his book, and almost every sentence started with walking into the room, sitting on the sofa, talking on the phone, And it's these ing sentences, and he started all of his sentences with that. Now, what that tells me about him as an author, and his stories are great. Like, I love his stories, but that tells me that for some reason, as much as he's written and as much as he's published, he can't get himself in without that ing. That ing sort of rolls him into his sentences, but it's passive voice, and anything that repeats over and over again, it's not like a hook in a song, right? The reader starts to get bored. And a lot of times I will look at something from reader perspective. How do I feel as a reader reading this? So one of the first things I did with that guy was I highlighted them all and I showed him. And Dave has done this too, where somebody will use very, right? Somebody will use very like 300 times.
Just as one of the go-to words.
Yeah. And
it just doesn't mean anything, right?
No. And so we kind of spot those things about you, and we'll tell you why they don't work. And those ing phrases, sometimes you need them, maybe like 3 times in a book, not every sentence.
I see a lot of writers, when they write dialogue, will start every sentence of dialogue with, hey, or oh, or by the way, or not so much by the way, but hey. I don't like, you gotta like, first of all, it makes every character sound the same, right? So if you have one character whose thing is like, I always start every sentence by saying, hey, that's my thing, that's fine. But when it happens every time or almost every time, and it's every character, it's a weakness in the writing. And those are the kind of things we try to point out to the writers in a constructive way, that you can tell your story. I always try to advise authors, like, because this is what was advised to me when I was working with my agent, was tell your story, but be as concise as possible. If you can say a phrase, a 3-word phrase, and you can get that down to 1 word.
Thinking of that, I actually printed myself a t-shirt. I don't have it on, otherwise I would show you. But after that experience with self-publishing my own book, and it was kind of a memoir, it was short stories from my life back when I was a wedding photographer, and people would always ask me, oh gosh, you photograph weddings, that you must have a lot of stories. And I started about it, and I said, I do actually. And so I wrote them down, put them in a book, but that was 11 years ago now. The biggest thing I remember from that entire experience, as I was going through the editing process, I took out the word that probably 1,000 times. So I made myself a t-shirt. It's got the word that, and it's got it strike through, right through it, because what I discovered and what other people said is you can typically take out the word that and it doesn't change very much. But for some reason, we put it in, like we would put in a speech, we would put in a like or a that same sort of crutch in writing. So the word that, but David, like you said, really or very, I might just make a t-shirt with all of those and strike through the reallys, the very just.
Yeah, really is really bad and very is very bad. Yeah, no, it's true. It's funny, right? We have crutches. We don't realize that we have them. So we all gotta, we all need a second set of eyes at least. And Dave and I, we'll typically look at each other's work, which is hard on the marriage, but it's important. It's very important to do that. And we've had some writers too that we both think are really creative, brilliant writers, and their work deserves to be read. But their command of grammar is in the basement kind of thing. And that's another thing that I think Dave and I pride ourselves on doing, is not ditching a story because the writer might not have been as educated as another writer might have been, or, in some other way, they know how to tell a story, an exciting story, a story I really want to read, but maybe they just don't understand about verb tense, and we'll help with that. I was working on a story yesterday that was written in first person point of view. And that's something else that I think a lot of people don't realize. They kind of have that natural inclination to write in first person point of view. I woke up that morning and I realized that I was going to be late for work. But if they're writing that, they're automatically in past tense. If the first person point of view character is telling a story in past tense, then that character cannot say, so when I went to the McDonald's, the hamburger they gave me was cold. And then they can't say something like, why is this hamburger cold? Because that's present tense.
Right.
So it's hard to give the narrators reactions or thoughts or feelings because they're not in the moment anymore. They're telling about the moment. Whereas an omniscient narrator avoids that completely. You don't have to worry about it. But a lot of people have that inclination to write in first person, and then you hit that problem. It's kind of like if you say, if a person wants to go to college and then you start saying they, the person singular, but the they is plural, and our brain switches to the plural because it doesn't want to have to bother with the he or she, or it's the same thing. It's those little disconnects. And to our mind, they read perfectly clearly, but to a reader, it's going to feel suddenly I'm there yesterday, but now I'm there today. And how is this happening? But if the story is good, that doesn't bother us at all. We will show them how to fix it. And we really try to, when we edit somebody too, to kind of explain it as we go. And authors that we've worked with a couple of times, we've seen them virtually eliminate those issues on their own because they start to get it.
They start to see the things that you see.
Yeah.
See before until you showed them. That's great.
I think because Dianne has a background in teaching, that as an editor, she brings that teacher component to it. So she's not just striking through a word in your manuscript and substituting another word or rephrasing something. She's putting an explanation in as to why this is warranted, right? Or you had said earlier about Deborah, like, slash through some paragraphs and things. And a lot of writers, and we've all, I think anyone who's written has done it, where you get to a point in your story where you just need to explain a lot, so you do this huge information dump. I see it in TV shows a lot. We watched a couple series recently, and it was like the series was going on, and then all of a sudden, like, get to episode 8, and it's just like, the whole episode is an information dump. Well, writers will do that too in their manuscript. Like, all right, I got to explain all this now, so I'm just going to put it here. I'm just going to have one character just tell everything. It's a little predictable. It's a little boring. It's not great. And a lot of times, like, the information can be spread throughout or told in a different way. Like, don't just tell me, show me, right? You had mentioned that earlier. So Dianne's got really a good handle on like how to balance that or how to rework something like that in a way that's constructive for the author and makes the story stronger.
Yeah. And I wouldn't take their information dump and rewrite it. I would take their information dump and I would cut it up into reasonable pieces and spread it here and there. Or even with that ING guy who started his sentences with the INGs, right? Typically, all they need to do is be moved. They just need to come at the end of the sentence instead of the beginning, and then it's okay. That one person had a lot of them, but in general, a lot of times the writing is misplaced. It's in the wrong spot. It's not my writing. I don't want to make it my words. Occasionally I'll put something in my own words, but I always say, this is a sample. You can keep it, you can trash it, you can change it. But I think that you need something. And this is what, a sample of what I would suggest. But it's important to kind of keep that writer's voice. And that's how you do it, by not slashing and burning or rewriting, by just putting their pieces where they should go.
We have had occasional authors we work with who will just tell us at the get-go, like, hey, I'm new to writing. I don't really know a lot of writing. I wanted to write this story. Like, feel free to slash and burn it. Like, just, it needs a lot of work. Just go ahead and just do it, right? So in those cases, we will take a little more liberal approach to the editing, right? We might do a little heavier edit than we typically do because they're telling us up front, like, they recognize that they need it as well.
Yeah.
Typically, it's a light touch.
Yeah, because it's important that it stays theirs.
Their words, their voice.
And things that I would really recommend that they cut is if they do have dialogue and they have a lot of Joe said, Anne said, Joe said, Anne said. You don't always need those dialogue tags. You need a couple of them, but then the reader will fall into the rhythm. It's like markings on a trail, right? You need to give the reader enough so that they can follow, but not so many that it's not exciting to them anymore, that it's become boring, that they don't get to sort of figure it out.
And there's ways around that too. They can be folded into the dialogue itself so that you just inherently know who's speaking by something that's in the dialogue.
Yeah, right.
So you can avoid the he said, she said over and over again.
Over and over. Yeah, that gets really repetitive. And as someone who has written a little bit, but not for my job, I guess you say, or not looking to necessarily write books upon books, I find myself getting analysis paralysis because I don't have someone on my team, which I need to fix that. But I went down the rabbit hole. This was probably a couple of years ago. I had a great idea for a story, and it had multiple main characters. And my problem was I was so paralyzed on trying to figure out the point of view to tell the story. Do I do first person for each character? Do I do the narrator, the omniscient style? And then I found some work that said, oh no, that's outdated, that's passe, like nobody does that anymore. And then I was like, oh gosh, so how do I bring this all together? And if someone is having that experience, hopefully you don't, because it's just not fun, because it keeps you, I think, 3 years into it now and haven't gotten any farther. So once I, crack that, I'll be able to move forward with the project. And my whole point in saying that is just having someone on your team like you guys who could say, it's fine, just do it this way, that way, that's totally normal. Then you don't have to fret about it, would be huge. So what does it look like when someone comes to you guys and they have an idea, or they've started writing, they've gotten down the road and they want to say, hey, is this good? Is this worth pursuing? Then you look at it and you say, yes, it's definitely worth pursuing. You need to make some changes. What does that process from the idea, like your initial read of what they have, all the way to them having a printed book in their hand and doing a book signing or whatever it is they do to celebrate? Does that timeline look like? I know everybody's different. Everything's going to be a little different timeline, but what's typical? If someone's listening right now thinking, okay, I could call Dianne and David and we could get this party started, what would it look like for them?
If I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that the book is in process, but it isn't finished yet, right?
Really, for them, it would be like, hey, I've had this idea and I've written down some things. I've written maybe a chapter or two, and I just want to see, before I go farther, putting more energy in it. And if you guys thought it was viable, like, yeah, let's make this a book, then what happens from there?
Whether a story is viable or not, it largely depends on whether the person really wants to get it out there. And they say like 90% of adults report that they would like to write a novel, but about 12% actually do. Maybe it's a little more now. I'm not sure, but
I want to raise that percentage is what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah. So I've had people come to me because they want to get it done and they can't get it done. And I'm a little, ADD myself, and I have faced those same demons. Dave is much better at getting his work done than I am. And I think part of it is you do want somebody to reassure you that it's a decent idea, that you're on the right track, And that's the nice thing about us too, is that we can do parts. We don't have to do the whole thing. So I worked with a guy last year who came to me like that. He had a story started. He wanted to finish it, and he didn't know if he could get himself to finish it. Basically, he didn't know if it was a good story. He didn't know if it was worthwhile. So he started meeting with me as it fit his schedule, as it fit his budget, like once or twice a month, and that's book coaching. We do a Zoom like this. I'll read your stuff ahead of time. We'll talk about it. And the good thing was I could tell him when I felt like it was interesting to me, but pretty quickly too, like we've become friends. I got to know him, and I could also tell when the gears were grinding, and I would say to him, it doesn't feel good to me here. I don't feel like I'm enjoying it as a reader. I don't feel like you're enjoying it as a writer. So sometimes we would throw stuff at it. Like one of the things that I suggested to him was, imagine that you were making up trading cards for your characters. And when you come to me next time, I want you to tell me what's going to be on the trading card. It's going to tell me more about the character than this is. And sometimes it's just like making it tasty enough of a project that he wants to go back into it and work on it some more. And that's really what people need. And anyway, he's through 2 other books, but one he has finished, and it's been, it's going around to agents. It's been through a couple of agents. Nobody's picked it up yet, but he's gotten a lot of good feedback. I'm super excited about it. I just think it's such a delightful, fun sci-fi book. I love it. And I think he did an excellent job with it. And I hope it gets picked up. He had the talent. He had a great story idea. And he has 2 other really good ones that he's working on. He just needed somebody to help him get over those rough spots and to kind of spot when his enthusiasm had flagged and when he felt like he had to do this exposition, maybe explaining everything, and it was boring. Let's find a different way to explain it then. What if we looked at it from this point of view? Or what if the character did something totally offbeat that you wouldn't expect the character to do? What would happen then? And you don't always keep that stuff, but it puts money in the bank that you can kind of then keep going,
And for the person who is listening and they think, okay, that's great, I could get some coaching with helping get the words right. But For someone who maybe has a memoir idea and they just want to be completely, have you hold their hand through the process, say, you guys help me not only get the words right, but help me format it, help me get that cover, help me take it all the way to the printed book. What does that typically look like? Do you spend most of the time, I would imagine, getting the words right, getting the story to flow, getting it readable? And then what's the timeline that you might work with someone where you guys are helping them through the entire process?
So if they come to us with nothing written, which would be one end of the spectrum, right? Or the book all done, which would be the other end of the spectrum. If the book is all done, I would say 3 to 4 months, Dave, to go live.
Yeah. We're very flexible. It depends on, like, if somebody says to me, hey, it's June and I've got a family reunion coming up in October and I'd love to get this memoir done because it's all about my great grandfather. I'm like, we're flexible. So we can accommodate a schedule like that. That is about 3 to 4 months. And if it was 2 to 3 months, we could do it. I would say, like, the biggest factors are, as you said, editing takes a bit of time. Proofreading goes pretty quickly. Cover design will go pretty quickly. Those pieces all fall together. What can add time to it kind of depends on what the author's end game is, right? If you're solely looking to have a piece to share with family and friends, or if you're just looking to have something to take to a speaking engagement because you're a public speaker and you want to sell books at the end of each engagement, this would move along rather quickly if you need it. If you're looking to do a more traditional book where you want it to be out available for shops to order, you want it to be available online to order at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, you want to do some marketing behind it, if you want a book trailer, you want to do some advertising, things like that.
Submit for awards, right? That makes a big difference because the award season starts in January and ends in December. So if you are interested in submitting your book for awards, you don't want to put your book out in November because you have no time.
Yeah.
You want to put it out, and you might think, oh, I'll put it out in November for the Christmas rush, but nobody knows about you. Nobody knows your book is coming out, and you haven't had a chance to get any feedback from awards or from reviewers. So it's really not a good time, right? You'd really do better to hold it over to January. And we can even do it where maybe you want copies to give out at Christmas. Okay, well, we can get you copies to give out at Christmas, but we're going to set the publication date in January, because then you have that whole year that you can kind of work the book. Books never die. You can keep working them year after year after year, but awards do. The awards come and go in a certain time frame. And if you want to hit those awards, November is not the time for you to publish. You want to be in the first half of the year so that you have time.
It really does come down to, like, the author will kind of tell us their objectives, and then we can work a schedule that meets those objectives, but also is mindful to things like awards that they might or might not be interested in submitting a book to, or having us submit the book to by proxy.
Yeah. Another thing that Dave and I do too, there are going to be some people who are going to be sort of like a business publisher. They run a real estate company and they want to give out books to people that they train. And Dave and I make a nice looking book. We can absolutely do that for you. Or somebody who wants to take the book to the family reunion again. That's totally fine. We can do that for you too. But somebody who might want to get awards or might want to have a more globally available or interest in their book, Dave and I know how to do that. And we have built a family kind of among the authors that we've published, so that when our author puts out their book, we send a PDF of the book to all of our other authors. And, we're not going to make you read horror if horror isn't your thing, right? I don't want to keep anybody up at night, but we ask, can you read so-and-so's book and can you give them a review on Amazon? And of course, if you're a new writer to us too, we're going to open up our catalog to you and we're going to say, if you have time and you want to, it's voluntary, but sometimes we have Zooms where we get all our authors on and we talk about what you've had success with, what you're doing with your blog or your social media posts. Are there any opportunities for you to do any live reading events? And we try to kind of crowdsource that among our family of writers to really help people feel like they have people interested in them, and everybody's excited when somebody's book gets done. It really makes a big difference. So it's just those little things, and that's sort of us, right? I get really interested in my authors, like crazy interested in them. Yeah. So it's kind of how it's our personalities.
If someone is listening to our conversation here today and they're thinking, you know what, I've been working through this idea in my head for so long and it's time I get this out, what's the best way to make contact with both of you and maybe get that ball rolling, maybe have that first conversation to see if that's something you could help them with?
Well, you can go to the website, just Google Current Words Publishing. The other thing that we'll do too is we'll hop on a Zoom call with anybody who wants us to. We always give time first, and we're not a hard sell or anything like that. I mean, we have enough people coming that it's not that we have to even really sell, but that's not what we're interested in. I still do a day job. Dave still does a day job. We'd love to only do this someday, but it's a heart project for both of us, which I think makes it more fun on our end. It's kind of if we don't have a book to work on the weekend, we don't really know what to do with ourselves. We really enjoy.
I get that. That's how it's been with this podcast. Is not for me. I'm still a photographer. I still do that during the week, and I did force myself to dedicate one entire day a week to the podcast. That's usually Wednesdays. Today's a Sunday. I record on Sundays and Wednesdays, but I do my editing, my social media, all the other things on Wednesdays. So that's how, like you said, if you're a writer, you're going to be doing that when you're not doing your regular work. So that's right now how I am with the podcast. And then hopefully it will move into something a little bigger, but you have to start somewhere. And it's always good to have help.
So that's the other thing, as we grow our business, we're trying to grow our writers' influence out there too in the world. And it's important to us. I would love nothing better than to have one of our writers realize all of their dreams. That would be great for Dave and I.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you guys wanted to discuss or address?
You talked about doing your social media stuff on Wednesdays, right? That probably made a huge difference in your life. It probably made you better at being out there and letting people know about you, but it also probably gave you time for yourself in your life too, right? Authors have to figure out that piece. And so many of the platforms that are out there, we use WordPress, makes it very easy to kind of schedule stuff so that you can say, first Sunday of the month, I'm going to spend 2 hours writing all of my posts for the month, and I'm going to schedule them on WordPress. And Dave and I can show you how to do that. And people sometimes they don't know how much should I write about? What should I write about? Even if your book comes out and everybody in your family reads it and they love it and they want to put a review on Amazon, they don't know what to write, so they don't do it. Yeah. You make up little things, right, that you can give your friends and family that say, I enjoyed this book.
Yeah.
I'm glad I bought this book. When somebody looks at the reviews on Amazon, that's all they want to know is, am I going to blow my money if I buy this book? My brother loves horror, and he said this was a great collection. It's all you need to know. But people feel this pressure to do so much that they do nothing. Yeah. And that's where somebody like us comes in, and we give that little boost. We take away the fear of it being this huge, massive project. It's really not. And a writer can quickly get up to speed on putting themselves out there and creating who they are as a writer, which is different from who you are as a dog owner or a parent or whatever it might be.
I think one thing that our objective here to help writers also is a writer could be terrific at writing, but really not, as Dianne said, like quite know what to do with the manuscript. Or they could toy around on KDP a little bit and end up getting frustrated, as some do. So we're here to provide a service that way also to help you not just like polish your manuscript and give you a really nice looking cover and make sure that everything looks good, but to enable you to get your title out into a published format so that you, the writer, can like spend your time focusing on doing more writing, right? Because a lot of people find that other process intimidating and demoralizing and kind of like, oh my gosh, like I've written this book, but I'm going to have to learn this software, or I'm going to have to now go out and talk about it, because there's that introvert in everybody too. So we walk you through that and kind of say like, yeah, you actually can do this, and it actually doesn't have to be a negative or something you fear, and you can actually do it well. And here we're going to show you how to do it, and we're going to be a partner with you and kind of like hold your hand through the process so that you walk away feeling more confident. And all this time if you want, you're working on other books, right?
Zoom is a beautiful thing, right? You can hop on a Zoom with me you can bring up your manuscript on your screen and I can edit your manuscript on the screen with you, with both of us looking at it. Or you can come on a Zoom and you can share screen and you can show me your WordPress site that you want to create. And I can tell you how to work it because I've already had a million tech support chats. So I know how to do it. So you don't have to worry about doing that. And I can do it for you quickly and easily. And another thing that Dave and I do, I don't know if we put it on Current Words yet, but we have a lit mag, a little literary magazine we do, Instant Noodles. It's free to submit to. Anybody can read it. It's online. But we try to give authors, and that can be, we take art, we take fiction, we take nonfiction, we take poetry. We try to give writers a place to get a little bit of exposure that doesn't cost them anything because you need that feedback too, right? Your writing is up there. People can look at it. You can start to build some sort of reputation, or you can put it on your social media and it celebrates you as a writer and it makes you feel like a writer. So Dave and I do a lot of stuff like that, it's no charge for. It's just we like to do it. Instant Noodles is a lot of fun and we really enjoy doing it. And we just had an issue come out.
Yeah, I just see it here on your blog on the website. So if you go to currentwords.com and go to the blog, it's got that issue. It's got a little bit about Instant Noodles. So that's really cool.
I love doing it. It's so much fun. It's I don't make any money at it and it takes a significant amount of time actually, but I enjoy every bit of it. It's so fun.
Since Dianne started Instant Noodles, you've published probably 200 authors, artists, and poets, right? Something like that.
I mean, quite a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really a nice, I think what Dianne's bring the opportunity for writers and authors and poets and illustrators to get publishing credits and to see their work as part of a larger community of creators. Yeah, and she pulls it off really well. Every time I'm always impressed at how many people have submitted and just how many she's able to, Dianne basically builds everything in WordPress and just does it on her own. And
I really love doing it so much that I've sort of fought my way through and it's gotten to the point where it's easy for me and I try to make it easy for everybody else too.
Just like anything you care about, you want to make sure it's going to be great. And you guys have done such a good job of building community to give authors a voice to be able to share their story. And I'm so excited to get this out into the world for anyone who does listen to this and is thinking, I've been really procrastinating on this. I've had that, what I call that analysis paralysis of what to do if you have such a big project. So thanks to both of you, Dianne and David, for making your expertise available, for doing this.
Well, thanks for having us, James. It's always fun to meet people who are doing creative things too, different from us, right? I love podcasts and I have to say I harbor aspirations of podcasting, but again, the technology is like, I don't know.
It can feel a little daunting at first, for sure, to get everything lined up. And then for the audio quality, that's one thing I am constantly struggling with talking to people. We're across the country. I'm on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast. Some days Zoom is happy and some days Zoom is crackly. And working through that is always fun. But thank you so much for being here.
I hope you'll stay in touch because it's really nice to meet you.
Yeah, James, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for joining me today. And if you have an extra minute, I have a favor to ask. Some of you listen to this show on Apple Podcasts, and a lot of you I talk to are on Spotify or Amazon. I'd love it if you would take just a second to leave a rating or a review. It lets the platforms know that listeners are getting value from the show and suggest it to others who are interested in similar content. And as always, if you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a guest suggestion, or just general feedback, I'd love to hear about that too. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at ajoyfulrebellion.com.